The transport pod descended through layers of shimmering energy shields, and Laura Bennett felt her stomach tighten. Below stretched the Celestial Court, a structure so vast it had its own weather systems. Crystalline spires rose kilometers into artificial clouds, and between them floated platforms where beings from 100 worlds gathered. This was the center of galactic power, and humanity had finally earned an invitation. "Ambassador, we're receiving docking clearance," Marcus said from the co-pilot's seat. Her aide looked nervous, his dark hands gripping the armrests. "I've reviewed the protocols again. The Veltari take ceremony seriously. Any misstep could embarrass us in front of half the galaxy," Laura finished. "I know, Marcus. I've been preparing for this for 2 years." The pod settled onto a landing platform carved from a single piece of amber-colored stone. As the hatch opened, Laura stepped out into air that tasted like copper and starlight. A delegation of Veltari waited, their bodies tall and impossibly thin, skin shimmering with patterns that shifted like oil on water. At their center stood a female whose crown seemed to be made of captured light itself. "Ambassador Bennett of Earth," the figure said, her voice melodic, but somehow empty of warmth. "I am Empress Shalvera. You honor us with your presence, though we confess surprise at your species' rapid advancement. It was only recently you split the atom, was it not?" Lara forced a smile. 50 years ago, by your calendar, Empress. We've learned quickly." "Indeed." Shalvera's expression didn't change, but something in her tone made Laura's instincts flare. "Come, the summit begins shortly. You will find our discussions most enlightening." The royal demonstration hall could have swallowed a city. Delegates from dozens of species occupied floating observation platforms, arranged in concentric circles around a central stage. Laura recognized some from the briefings: the crystalline Tsar, the aquatic Morvani, the insectoid Chak Collective. Each species represented millions of years of evolution, civilizations that had mastered technologies humans barely understood. And then there was Earth, represented by one woman in a simple blue suit. Marcus guided her to their assigned platform, smaller than most, positioned in the outer ring. As they settled in, Laura noticed the glances, the whispered conversations in languages her translator couldn't quite parse. She'd expected curiosity. What she felt instead was condescension. "Distinguished delegates," Shalvera's voice filled the hall without apparent amplification. "We gathered to discuss admission of new species to the Galactic Council. Today, we consider humanity's petition." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Laura sat straighter. "The humans have demonstrated certain technological proficiencies," Shalvera continued. "However, council membership requires more than technical skill. It demands wisdom, stability, and the ability to govern one's own nature." Her gaze fixed on Laura. "We have concerns." Before Laura could respond, another platform drifted forward. A male Veltari stood there, younger than Shalvera but radiating the same cold authority. His crown was smaller, his robes marked with symbols Laura recognized as military honors. "I am Prince Kael Ron," he announced, "and I speak for many when I question humanity's readiness. Your species is volatile, prone to violence and emotional excess. Your history is written in blood. Your present is fractured by conflict. Why should we trust such beings with galactic governance?" Laura's jaw tightened. Marcus touched her arm in warning, but she was already standing. "Prince Kael Ron, our history also includes unprecedented cooperation, scientific achievement, and cultural evolution. Yes, we've had conflicts. We've also ended them. We've learned. Have you?" Kael Ron's platform moved closer, and Laura saw something in his eyes that looked almost like amusement. "Then perhaps you would submit to the trial of composition. It is an ancient test, designed to measure a species' evolutionary maturity. If you pass, your worthiness would be beyond question." The hall went silent. Marcus stood quickly. "Ambassador, you don't have to." "What does the trial involve?" Laura asked. Shalvera leaned forward slightly. "It is a test of psychological endurance, Ambassador. You would be subjected to scenarios designed to provoke extreme emotional responses. A truly evolved being maintains perfect equilibrium regardless of circumstances. It is how we Veltari prove our superiority to our own primitive ancestors. Laura felt the weight of thousands of eyes on her. Refuse, and humanity would seem cowardly. Accept, and she might fail spectacularly in front of the entire galactic community. But there was no real choice, and Kale Ron knew it. I accept, she said. The prince smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Excellent. The trial begins immediately. The central stage transformed. Reality itself seemed to bend as holographic projectors activated, and suddenly Laura stood alone in the middle of the platform. The observation decks remained visible around her, every delegate watching, but between her and them stretched something that felt horribly real. The trial begins with what you fear most. Kale Ron's voice echoed through the hall. Let us see how humans handle terror. The air shimmered and Earth appeared before her, not as she'd left it, but burning. Continents glowed red with nuclear fire. Oceans boiled. The atmosphere peeled away in streams of ionized gas. Laura knew it wasn't real, knew it was just photons and force fields, but her heart hammered anyway. This is what awaits your world if you prove unworthy, Kale Ron said. Watch carefully, Ambassador. This is your planet dying. The view zoomed in, showing cities collapsing, forests reduced to ash, millions of lives ending in an instant. Laura's hands shook. She forced them still, forced her breathing to steady. It wasn't real, but then the scene changed. She was standing in her childhood home in Chicago. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Laura had done homework, and shared dinners and learned what it meant to be human. Her mother looked up, and her eyes were full of betrayal. You failed us, Laura, her mother whispered. You failed everyone. That's not real, Laura said aloud, her voice cracking. My mother would never. The kitchen exploded into flames. Laura flinched backward as her mother's image burned, screaming, reaching for her with hands that blackened and crumbled. Around the hall she heard murmurs. She could feel the delegates' judgment like physical weight. The trial continued. They showed her Marcus, executed for her failures. They showed her humanity enslaved, reduced to animals serving alien masters. They showed her every nightmare she'd ever had, every fear she'd buried to do this job. And through it all, Kale Ron's voice narrated her inadequacy. See how her physiology betrays her emotional volatility? Heart rate elevated, stress hormones flooding her system. This is what humanity offers the galaxy. Weakness disguised as strength. Laura tried to maintain composure. She'd trained for psychological warfare, had endured simulations and stress tests, but this was different. This was designed by beings who'd spent millions of years perfecting cruelty. Every image hit a nerve she didn't know she had. Finally, they showed her Earth restored, beautiful and whole, with one condition. She would never see it again. She would be exiled forever, forgotten, dying alone among aliens who would never understand what it meant to be human. Something inside her broke. Laura dropped to her knees and wept, not the dignified tears of a politician making a calculated gesture, but real, choking sobs that shook her entire body. She buried her face in her hands and cried for her world, her species, her mother, for the crushing weight of representing 7 billion souls who deserved better than her failure. The holographic scenarios faded. Laura knelt alone on the platform, crying in front of the assembled galactic powers. Laughter rippled through the hall, not from everyone, but enough. The Veltari delegation seemed particularly amused. There, Kale Ron announced, satisfaction dripping from his voice. The trial concludes. Ambassador Bennett has demonstrated precisely what we suspected. Humans are emotionally volatile, psychologically fragile, utterly unsuited for the responsibilities of council membership. I move that we table their petition for another millennium. Several delegates murmured agreement. Laura heard the death of humanity's dreams in those murmurs. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing tears across her cheeks. Then, slowly, she stood. Her legs shook, but they held. May I address the court? She asked, her voice rough but steady. Shalvera tilted her head. The trial is complete, Ambassador. There is no need for... May I address the court? Laura repeated louder this time. The Empress gestured graciously, as one might, to a defeated opponent. "If you wish." Laura took a breath and looked around the hall, meeting as many eyes as she could. Some were curious. Most were dismissive. A few looked almost pitying. "You're right," she began. "I failed your test. I felt fear. I felt grief. I felt despair so deep I thought I'd drown in it." She paused. "And you know what? I'm not ashamed of that. Kale." Ron's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. "I cried because I saw my world burning," Laura continued, her voice growing stronger. "Because I saw my mother die. Because the thought of humanity enslaved made me want to scream. And yes, Prince Kael'ron, my heart rate elevated. My stress hormones flooded my system. Because I'm human, and humans feel things." She walked to the edge of the platform, staring directly at the Valtari delegation. "You designed that test to prove we're weak, to show that emotion is a flaw. But you're wrong, dead wrong. Because emotion isn't what makes us weak. Emotion is what makes us strong." "Fascinating," Shalvera said, her tone unchanging. "Please, explain how weakness constitutes strength." Laura smiled, and there was steel in it. 300 years ago, a human named Sarah King led a rebellion against tyranny on Earth. She watched her husband executed, watched her children starve. She had every reason to surrender, to accept defeat, to give up. She felt that, despair, really felt it, in a way I suspect you can't even imagine. And then, through her tears, she picked up a rifle and fought anyway. She felt the fear and did it anyway. That's not weakness. That's... The hall had gone quiet. Laura pressed on. 150 years ago, when the Indonesian archipelago was swallowed by rising seas, displacing 50 million people, a man named Ahmed Hassan organized the largest rescue operation in human history. He worked for 48 hours straight, pulling children from floodwaters while his own family was missing. He felt that terror, that grief. It didn't stop him. It drove him. He saved 11,000 lives personally before he found his family alive. The emotion didn't make him weak, made him unstoppable. She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly now. 80 years ago, Dr. Jennifer Okoro developed the cure for Blackwell's syndrome, a disease that had killed 2 billion people. She watched her daughter die from it before she succeeded. She felt that loss every single day. And every single day, she got up and worked 18 hours in the lab because she couldn't bear for another parent to feel what she felt. Her grief didn't destroy her. It focused her. It gave her purpose. Laura's voice rose, filling the hall. "You want to know what humans offer the galaxy? We offer this. The ability to feel everything. The fear, the pain, the loss, and still choose to act. We don't suppress emotion. We don't eliminate it. We harness it. We turn grief into determination. We turn fear into vigilance. We turn rage into justice. We turn love into the kind of stubborn, relentless dedication that moves mountains and changes worlds." She looked back at Kael'ron. "You call us volatile. We call ourselves passionate. You call us emotionally fragile. We call ourselves empathetic. You see weakness in tears. We see the strength it takes to feel something deeply and not let it break us." Kael'ron's expression had shifted. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Your test measured my capacity to suppress emotion under stress," Laura said. "But suppression isn't strength. A dam holds back water, sure, but it's rigid, brittle. Put enough pressure on it, and it shatters completely. Humans aren't dams. We're rivers. We bend, we flow, we adapt. We feel the pressure, and we find ways through it, around it, over it. We don't break because we were never rigid to begin with." She turned to Shalvera. "Empress, I suspect the Veltari eliminated emotion from your species because you couldn't control it. You chose suppression because adaptation was too hard. You engineered away your feelings because you were afraid of them. And now you sit in judgment of a species that looked at that same challenge and made a different choice. We kept our emotions. We learned to live with them, to use them, to let them make us better instead of worse." The silence in the hall was absolute now. Laura could feel the shift in atmosphere, like static electricity before a storm. "Here's what you don't understand," she said quietly. "Every major achievement in human history came from someone who felt something so deeply they couldn't stay silent. Every act of courage, every moment of sacrifice, every breakthrough and triumph and desperate last stand, all of it powered by emotion, by love for family, by rage at injustice, by grief that demanded meaning, by hope that refused to die." She spread her hands. "You want to know if humans are ready for the responsibility of galactic governance? Ask yourselves this. When a crisis comes, when everything is falling apart and the easy choice is to give up, do you want leaders who feel nothing, or do you want leaders who feel everything and fight anyway?" Laura's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the perfect acoustics of the hall, everyone heard. "I cried today because I'm human, because I love my world enough that the thought of losing it breaks my heart. And if that's what disqualifies us from this council, then I accept that. But know this, humanity will keep growing, keep building, keep reaching for the stars, and we'll do it with tears in our eyes and fire in our hearts, because that's what we are. That's what we've always been." She stopped talking. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10, 20. Then Empress Shalvera stood. The entire Veltari delegation rose with her, a wave of shimmering forms that commanded absolute attention. Shalvera descended from her platform, moving with a grace that seemed to defy physics. She approached Laura's platform, and for the first time, Laura saw something in the Empress's eyes that looked almost like sadness. "Ambassador Bennett," Shalvera said, and her voice carried a weight it hadn't held before. "You have given us much to consider." She paused, and Laura realized the entire hall was holding its breath. 3,000 years ago, Shalvera began, the Veltahari Empire stood at a crossroads. Our emotions had driven us to the brink of self-destruction. War, jealousy, hatred. These things nearly ended our species, so we made a choice. We used genetic engineering to eliminate emotional response. We became rational, perfect. She looked around the hall, and Laura understood that this speech wasn't just for her. And for 3,000 years we have led this council with unwavering stability. We have made decisions unclouded by feeling. We have governed with pure reason. Shalvera's gaze returned to Laura. And for 3,000 years, we have stagnated. A murmur of shock rippled through the delegates. Kel Ron stepped forward, but Shalvera raised a hand, silencing him. "We have not produced a truly original work of art in millennia," she continued. "Our scientific advancement has slowed to incremental progress. We do not create anymore. We merely refine. We do not dream. We calculate. We eliminated our weaknesses, Ambassador Bennett, and in doing so we eliminated something essential." Shalvera moved closer to Laura, studying her with an intensity that felt invasive. "You stood here and wept. You felt genuine terror and grief. And then you transformed that experience into the most compelling argument I have heard in 3 centuries. You took your supposed weakness and wielded it like a weapon. That is something no Velhari could do. That is something we lost when we cut emotion from our biology." The Empress turned to address the full assembly. "I have watched humanity for 50 of your years. I have seen you wage terrible wars and achieve impossible peace. I have seen you destroy and create with equal passion. I have seen you fail and rise and fail again, always driven by feelings we can no longer access. And I have come to a conclusion." She looked back at Laura. "The galaxy does not need more perfect, rational beings. It needs exactly what you described. Beings who feel deeply and act anyway. Beings who love enough to fight, who grieve enough to remember, who hope enough to try." Shalvera's next words seemed to cost her something. "I have often wondered what we lost when we excised emotion. Now I know. We lost the ability to feel victory as more than a logical outcome. We lost the capacity to truly mourn our defeats. We lost the fire that turns mere existence into actual living. We became efficient, Ambassador, but we stopped being alive." She turned to the assembled delegates. "I move that Earth be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Furthermore, I propose that humanity be given a seat on the executive committee. We need their perspective. We need their passion. We need to remember what it means to feel things that matter. The hall erupted. Delegates argued, debated, demanded clarification, but Laura barely heard it. She was watching Shalvera, seeing past the artificial calm to something underneath, something that looked like longing. The vote took an hour. When it concluded, Earth had been accepted by a margin of 73 to 27. Humanity was now a member of the Galactic Council. Marcus appeared beside Laura, his eyes wide with disbelief. "We did it," he whispered. "You did it." Laura nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Around them, delegates approached to offer congratulations or register protests. She shook hands, accepted greetings, tried to process what had just happened. Then Kale Ron stepped onto her platform. Up close, the prince looked younger than she'd thought. His eyes held something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, perhaps, or regret. "Ambassador Bennett," he said quietly, "I must apologize. The trial was designed to humiliate you, to prove human inferiority. I see now that it proved something else entirely." Laura studied him. "What made you want to break us so badly?" Kale Ron was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Because I envy you. All Valteri do, though we cannot admit it. We removed emotion thinking it was weakness, and we have spent 3 millennia watching other species experience things we cannot. Love, joy, even the grief you felt. At least it means something mattered enough to hurt when you lost it." He looked away. "We feel nothing. We are hollow, Ambassador. Perfect and utterly hollow." "It's not too late," Laura said. "Genetic engineering works both ways. You could restore—" "No." Kale Ron shook his head. "The choice was made. We cannot unmake it without unmaking ourselves. But perhaps we can learn from those who chose differently." He met her eyes. "Teach us, Ambassador. Teach us what it means to feel something real." He left before Laura could respond. The transport pod lifted from the Celestial Court 6 hours later, carrying Laura and Marcus back to the human embassy station. Earth's news feeds were already exploding with the news. Humanity was part of the galactic community. The species that had barely left its own solar system was now sitting at the table with civilizations millions of years old. "They'll want you back on Earth for the celebration," Marcus said. "Probably name a city after you." Laura smiled tiredly. "I think I'd rather stay up here. There's work to do." "Ambassador, you just won humanity's greatest victory. You're allowed to celebrate." "I didn't win anything, Marcus. I just reminded them that feeling things isn't a weakness." She looked out the viewport at the infinite stars. "The real work starts now. We have to prove we deserve this, that our emotions make us better leaders, not worse ones. Do you think we can?" Laura thought about Sarah King, fighting through her tears, about Amada-san, working through his terror, about Jennifer Okoro, channeling grief into purpose, about every human who'd ever felt something deeply and chosen to act anyway. "Yeah," she said, "I think we can." Outside, the stars burned with cold, perfect light. But inside the pod, Laura felt warm. She felt hopeful. She felt ready. She felt human. And for the first time in her life, she understood that was exactly enough.